right, good morning. Wherever you may be, here we are. Day 4, this is the final day, the wrap up to our series on taking this deep dive with our kettlebells and really understanding how to use them to get what we want out of them in any situation. You can use them for flexibility, mobility, strength, balance, endurance, and then finally today we're talking about power and plyometrics. And plyometrics are really going to fall under power, but I'm differentiating the two, and you'll see why when we get to our exercises. But first, let's talk a little bit about what power is and why you might want to train for it and how to do those types of trainings for power. So power is essentially your explosiveness. That is going to be how much power you can produce, the most amount of power in a short amount of time. This is rapid, it is strong, it is forceful. Think about throwing a ball or jumping in the air or thrusting up into the air with a kettlebell. This is all power. You're giving all you have into this very short duration. And this goes great kind of dovetailing into our endurance. We talked a little bit about that yesterday, but really, right, endurance, we're talking about submaximal loads for a longer period of time to utilize our aerobic capacity, right, using oxygen to create more energy. And then on the other side of that, this is going to be on the other end of the spectrum, we have power, which is going to be closer to a maximal load, still not as much as your maximum strength, but more than your endurance, and then a shorter amount of time, so it's using your anaerobic system, right? We're using it for that 30 seconds or less duration. Don't know why I said that like that. Duration. Something you want to know is with any power exercises, if you are training to elicit a response of power, we are going to keep it 30 seconds or less or 10 reps or less. Some people do power movements exclusively for 3 movements if you're working with something extremely heavy. So keep in mind, the heavier you work, the less reps you're going to do, because the purpose is max power as opposed to endurance, right? So if you become too fatigued, we start tapping into more of our aerobic, and also when you're more fatigued, you're not truly going to use your max force. In addition to that, in addition to keeping our working times shorter or our working reps shorter, we also want to increase the duration of our resting periods. This is because we want our heart rate and our breathing rate, that exertion, to come close back to standing or resting. It's not going to be complete resting because we are active and moving, but a lot lower than we would with endurance. Endurance, we might still be catching our breath a little bit before the next one. You want to be fully loaded for each set of your power exercises. Again, the reason being, the purpose of training for power is to get max power. So if you are fatigued from your last set or fatigued from too many reps, you are not going to get that max power. So shorter working times, longer resting times. That's how we train for power. Now, why do you want to train for power? I'm sure you're thinking maybe like, I don't want to be like a pro sprinter or jumper or anything like that. I don't jump in my everyday life, but you do things like get up off of your chair or get up off of the toilet even. We all do that. And that's going from a squatting position and you're powering up. That's a power movement. So, you know, when people start to age, power is the second to balance. Balance is the first thing that starts going. Start losing your innate sense of balance at age 25 if you don't keep it up. But your power is the second thing that will start degrading, and degrading the fastest. And that's why you see often our elders, our grandfathers, our grandmothers, when they're getting up out of the chair, they're using the hand rests because they no longer have the power in their glutes to just get up off the ground without their hands. So you might not think that you use power in your everyday life, but it's a very important skill to train. The more you train it, the stronger it is. And the longer you train it, the longer you'll hold on to it, right? You use it or lose it, essentially. So Hopefully that motivates you to training power if you never really thought about why that's important. It is fun too, but of course it really does serve a really valuable purpose in our life. So basically we have these two separate movements that we're going to talk about today, is plyometrics with kettlebells and then power, strength power with our kettlebells. For plyometrics, you might have heard this before, but essentially it's any explosive jumping movement, typically with body weight. We're going to be incorporating our kettlebells into our plyometrics to add a little bit more force and make it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more load. So for example, a typical plyometric that most people know is the squat jump. So the squat jump, of course, right? Jumping up, you're producing maximum amount of force in the shortest amount of time. Same thing, we're going to work some lunge jumps today. Same thing. We're going to pop up, maximum amount of force, shortest amount of time. We're going to have two variations for that. And then last thing we're going to do is ice skaters. That's going to be stepping to the side here, stepping to the side, reaching down, powering over, and powering with this glute, power, power, okay? These are fast movements. So before we get going with all of that super explosive stuff, make sure you stretch dynamically before you do these plyometrics, because you do want a big range of motion, and especially a lot of plyo power is going to come from our hips and our hamstrings, so we want to make sure those are nice and warmed up. So unlike the other days, this one's just really important that you're warmed up for power. You do not want to go right into power. So we're just going to do very quickly 5 sets, or 5 reps rather, of our inchworm. So nice straight legs, take a deep breath in, reach up, exhale, roll down to the floor, hands to the ground. Now take small steps, keep those hands, little steps, and legs nice and straight. Stretch those hamstrings out to the plank. So this is warming up our shoulders and our hamstrings. Now straight legs, itty bitty tippy toes up to the hands. Roll it up, and then we're going to do reverse. Hands to the ground, straight legs, tippy toes back, into your plank, straight legs, hands walk back. That's 1. Let's do 4 more. Walk it out. That's 3 more. And 2. And last inchworm out. Alright, so that's perfect. Just warms up our hips, hamstring, our posterior chain. Inchworms are a great way to get a quick little warm up for really all the parts of the body: core, shoulders, hips, hamstrings. So, for starters, plyometrics and adding kettlebells to plyos to get an increased load response. So we have 2 variations with our squat jump with our kettlebell here. And remember, 10 or less reps. And we're going to take long rest periods today with 45 seconds. So for starters, we're going to hold our kettlebell goblet style, and we're going to squat, explode, and jump up. Do not pause from here to here, from the bottom of the squat to the top, explosive, and likewise recoil back into the squat. You can hold down here and pause, but do not pause in any other part other than this loaded position. Also, do not pause too long. Not to get too deep into the science, but essentially, when you come down into the squat, let's see, this is a great illustration. So when you come down into the squat, here's my glute muscle, it's this band. When I come down, I stretch the band. When you stretch a band, what does it do? It loads it with power to explode, right? But with our muscles, what happens is that loaded energy that's going into the explode, if you hold it for too long, longer than 3 seconds, that energy dissipates as heat and you no longer are going to get that snap reactive. Now there's other reasons that you might want to train that, but in the spirit of our plyometrics today, do not pause in the bottom of your plyometrics any longer than 3 seconds, okay? So, let's begin holding our kettlebell. Elbows are in. We've gone over goblet a couple times now. Oh, just one moment, sorry. Make sure I plug in my laptop that's streaming, or that would be disastrous. So holding our kettlebell goblet style. Now if you find, remember, max power for you, if you find you get to 5 reps and you're like, I'm gassed on these kettlebells, stop at 5 reps. Do not push through to 10. This is not endurance, this is power. Every single rep you do, remember we talked about 0 to 100%? Instead of 60%, 75 like we did for endurance, today, each one, your first rep to your last rep is 100% every single one. If you start notice you're going past 90%, 89%, stop, all right? Maximum power, that's how we train it, okay? This is very important why we're going over how to elicit certain responses. If you want to train power, you have to apply these principles, okay? Here we go, goblet style. I'm gonna do 10, but you do as many as you can at your 90 to 100%, okay? So let's begin. Squat down, load your rubber bands, snap, recoil, and again, 2, 3, maximum power as high as you can, 5, 6, 7, and 10. Rest. This is our long rest, full recovery, okay? This is what I'm talking about to keep it 100%. 45 seconds, because imagine if we went again right now, when we're still winded. Can you get 100%? So that's not why we're doing it. This principle of long rests can also be applied to max strength. So just like how we want max power here, 100%, same thing when we're training strength, 100% long rests. So now for our second set of plyometrics with our squat, we're going to be holding it down low in a carry like so. All right, on our second rep, you're going to leave that kettlebell on the ground and jump without your bell. So you're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 in that manner. So we're getting a loaded and an unloaded variation as well as a different carry. You might find you can do a heavier bell with this lower carry than a goblet. All right, so again, 10 reps, max power, low carry, 10 reps or less, whatever's good for you. Organize your squat, your core, center your balance down the center of your foot. Here we go, inhale down and exhale, explode. Leave it, catch it. 3, 6, 7, 9, 10, rest. Long rest. Now just so you know, 30 seconds is the minimum amount of time it takes for your body to recharge that shot glass of ATP we talked about that's stored in your body. Ready to go at all times. So moving on, let's talk about lunge jumps. So we're gonna hold goblet style. We're gonna start with our beginner variation of lunge jumps, and then for our second round, I'll show you the more advanced lunge jumps. For our beginner goblet style, we step back into your lunge to begin with, but we're just gonna pop up and down in that lunge. If you find holding your kettlebell is really difficult, try these without first, and as an alternative, try 2 lighter kettlebells on either side. I find having the weight on either side can help balance and center you. Clearly it didn't for me on that one, but people sometimes feel more stable with a weight on either side rather than balancing on the middle. So because we have both sides to do, you have 2 choices. 10 on one side, rest, 10 on the other side, or what we're gonna do now, 5 on one, switch, 5 on the other. Because if I did 5 on the one, or 10 on the one, switched and did my 10 on the other, or whatever I'm trying to say, either way, you want to think about your total working time as well, right? So kind of that 30 seconds or less. You don't want to be really working for longer than that. So you want max power. Now we train max power. I'm going to do my lunge jumps from goblet, but your choice if you want to do no weight or hold 2 at the sides. So again, step back into your lunge, drop it down. You're going to pop up and down. One side, 2, 3, 4, 5, come up, step it back, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Excellent. Resting, and I'm sure as you guessed, for our next one, we're gonna switch. So if this was really difficult, the first one, try it out with no weight first on the second. If you're losing your balance too much, definitely don't pick up the weight and consider scaling it back. The purpose is not balance and stability today, it's power. So if you find your focus is getting diverted, change your input, change the variables. So for this one, I'll hold goblet style again. We're gonna do 10, switching off every other one. Holding goblet style. So I'm gonna be stepping up, popping up, switching my feet on the way back down. So 1, whoop, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Woo! And rest. All right, so for our last one, ice skaters. We're gonna hold our kettlebell by its horns out. When I step to this side, I'm gonna swing my kettlebell this way. When I step to this side, it's gonna swing the opposite way. It's going to be a counterbalance in this power movement. Again, 10 reps. You're gonna step it out to the side, here. All right, keep resting. Take another 20 seconds before we do this last move. I think I drank too much coffee and not enough water this morning. Amateur mistake. Let's get ready, ice skaters. Remember, hold by the horns, and we're gonna do 10. You can kind of feel it out. Okay, this is what I'm gonna be doing. Ready in 3, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right, so before we move to power, first off, if you have 2 kettlebells of a matching side, go ahead, grab those. It's okay if you have 1. You'll just be training some unilateral power instead of bilateral. Remember, bilateral means both sides, unilateral means one side. Bi, 2, uni 1, lateral means side. As opposed to medial, right, in the middle. So something I want you to notice about these 3 plyos that we just did, you've got 3 varieties of movement in it. You've got your bilateral, straight up and down. You've got your unilateral, straight up and down. And then you've got a unilateral that travels side to side. So you've got multiple planes of motion there and multiple options of bilateral or unilateral. So something to keep in mind. And if you want to change a regular plyometric squat to a multiplanar movement, all you have to do is turn when you jump. And look at that. You're changing planes. You're using the transverse plane. So though we didn't talk about that much in this series, moving around in 3D movement through all of this is really important. Variety in everything. Variety is the spice of life. I would even say variety is the glue holding life together. Too much is just collapses the scale. So let's get into power strength with kettlebells. So these moves, I think a lot of you will recognize, other than the swing, which is distinctly a kettlebell power move, we have the clean, the snatch, the thruster, and there's also a jerk, but I did not include that today. So these movements might be typically thought as barbell Olympic weightlifting movements, right? The barbell power clean, the barbell snatch, overhead jerk. But because kettlebells actually predate barbells, barbells are about 200 years old, kettlebells are 300 years old. So I would say all of these moves actually belong to the kettlebells, and that's their domain. And like I mentioned back on the first day, it's actually not only the national sport of Russia, which is snatching, cleaning with kettlebells. It's called kettlebell sport, gear point. And then also their military and the U.S. Secret Service who use a kettlebell 10-minute snatch test. That's an endurance test of a power move for the military in Russia and our Secret Service, as opposed to the U.S. military, which uses a push-up test. So you tell me which one you think is more functional for life. I don't know, seems kind of obvious. Anyway, so this is really delving into the heart of the beginning of kettlebells. This is where it all started. This is the kettlebell origins, is the kettlebell with these movements. So we have the swing, which we covered yesterday, really simple, just powering that movement. If you have your 2 matching kettlebells or a heavier kettlebell today, because we're doing power today, remember max power, I want you to go max out on this swing. We already covered our form, but just real quick, a couple reminders. Feet nice and straight. You can have a little bit of a turn up, but I do not want to be duck footed. And I want to make sure my legs are as close together as I can get them without the kettlebell hitting me in the knees, obviously. But we don't want to be taking this excessively wide stance. A third thing, we never want that kettlebell to go very low towards the ground and pull our chest down. We want the kettlebell to stay nice in our crotch. It's like you're grabbing your crotch essentially when you're doing it, or I've heard it described as a butt wipe, right? But we want to keep the chest open and send the hips back just slightly, enough to power that kettlebell. Think of that strap from yesterday. So I'm going to take a sip of water, grab the biggest bell you feel comfortable using for this exercise, and we're going to do 10 big swings, max power. I want this hip snap to be crisp. I want you to imagine that you're making your butt cheeks smack together. It's happening so fast, okay? This is power, okay? Enforcing maximum explosivity potential. I'm gonna do with my 2 bells. If you have 1 heavy bell, I'm jealous. Share it with me, please. But here we go, 10 or less of that swing. Power, movement. Inhale, come down. Make sure you breathe on each rep. Here we go. 1. Snap it. Keep the chest up. 9, 10, and lower it safely to the ground. Low stop. Nice. So I just want you to notice personally. Internally dive here. Feel. Same movement from our endurance yesterday, right? Totally different feel to how we use it, the weights we use, and the repetitions, right? We did 45 seconds of lightweight swings yesterday. How did that differ from your 10 reps or less of heavy swings today? What physiological changes do you feel that are different? Breathing harder than our endurance day, right? That aerobic system is catching up to our anaerobic. This miracle is the post-exercise oxygen consumption. Now, when you do strength training and power training, you increase the amount of oxygen that your body's intaking, not just shortly after catching your breath, but actually this happens on a micro level for the next 72 hours. Now, why do you care about that, right? Well, the more oxygen you're taking in, right, and the more your cells are turning over sources of stores into ATP, the higher your metabolism is. So really, when people talk about metabolism is your body's furnace, the creation of energy from raw material. The wood, right, is the raw material for the fire. The fire itself is the energy created. And you can harness fire in different ways. You can power a steam engine. Similar for our cells. ATP is the wood, the fuel that creates this energy and force. And then you can do everything that you do with that. So, power and strength, get that EPOC, post-exercise, excessive post-exercise, oxygen consumption, energy. Anyway, more oxygen after, longer, higher metabolism overall. So, let's take it into the heart of the matter, the 3 lovely movements, the clean, the snatch, and the thruster. So it's really important that you know how to do your swings correctly before you try and master the clean. That's because there is a swing movement in the clean and the snatch. It's actually in both of these movements. And right, we're harnessing the explosive power, especially of the glutes and the hamstrings in our swing. So I'm snapping my hips and my hamstrings are contracting to send that kettlebell up, and my arm is directing it out in that natural arc. Now today, instead of our arm just operating as a strap, we're going to direct that kettlebell's motion. So the hips are providing the force. But now, instead of letting my force go out in this arc, I'm gonna pull it up to my nipple line. So, everybody has them, right up to here. Think of this like a lawnmower move. You want the kettlebell to go as straight up alongside of your body as possible. To illustrate the difference, look at my swing going out and my clean coming up and how close it stays. So once you've pulled your kettlebell up to the nipple line, loosen, nice loose grip, you're going to roll your arm around the kettlebell. So the kettlebell is going to go from here, swing, pull up, and then I'm rolling around. I'm not letting the kettlebell go up and over, right? It's not doing this. I am rolling. It's called a screw home maneuver. I'm rolling my elbow underneath, and then that kettlebell is going to rest in the nice little nook here, and my elbow is going to rest on my torso. So if you'd like to do with a single, you can also do double if you're already familiar with your cleans from my class. If you're doing single, go ahead and do 5 on one, 5 or the other, or you can do 3 and 3, whatever you like. Remember 10 or less. And if you're doing doubles with me, we're going to go ahead and do 10. Now once you've got the kettlebell up here to go into your next snatch, you're going to let that kettlebell roll down, back in between your hips, reload the hips and snap and pull again, and it's just like that. Over and over. I'm going to do 2 kettlebells for 10. You choose if you want to do 1, or maybe you only have 1, or maybe you're not ready to try 2. Just make sure you do both sides evenly. So here we go. I'm going to start like I was going to do a swing, but instead of doing a swing, I'm just going to, remember, pull it up, lawnmower pull, roll and tuck. Here we go. For 10 reps, exhale with each time you explode your hips. That's 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Again, gauge how you feel after doing this type of movement. You should be recovering quite strongly. Because, right, if you really gave 100%, you should be like, whoo, 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 right? That's how it looks when we give 100%. So fun thing about these cleans, these work great into your flows that we talked about yesterday for endurance. You can work these into your flows as well. I didn't want to cover them yesterday. Really wanted to cover them as power as what they truly are. But take any of my kettlebell flow classes and you'll see we do a lot of cleans. We do a lot of thrusters, and sometimes we do snatches. So, speaking of snatches, first of all, yes, it is hilarious that it's called a snatch, and there are plenty of jokes out there, but this is actually one of the hardest moves you could possibly do, because if you call back to our strength day and you remember squatting with the weight over your head, a snatch is essentially a clean, but instead of tucking here, you're going to squat and come up in that overhead squat. So something to note, this is a very difficult exercise. I highly recommend starting with a lighter weight. If you find that your overhead squat is extremely difficult, nigh impossible for you, or causes pain, I would not recommend moving to a snatch yet. You should have a good handle on your overhead squat before you begin to snatch. Another thing is that our snatch is not what we did like yesterday for endurance, a press. There is no pressing movement involved. You should not feel the weight of the kettlebell as if you're pressing it overhead. Instead, what we're taking advantage of is that weightless moment, like in a swing here or in a clean here. We're taking advantage of that weightless moment to roll and squat so that when the kettlebell comes back down and lands on us, we're already underneath in a snatch, or in an overhead squat, excuse me. So for illustration, let's show you. So I have the swing position, right, where I snatch, or I squeeze my hips. I can't stop saying snatch. So snap the hips, right, pull up, and then squat underneath in fast motion that looks like this. What I'm not doing is this. Did you see the difference how I went from one where I finished underneath, my arm was already straight, and how the other, when my arm is bent and I press it overhead. No pressing, okay? We want to be under that kettlebell already in our overhead squat. It can be a little scary to get under the weight. There is a little bit of reminding yourself that, like, it's okay, I'm not going to drop it on my head, but get under that weight. Be supporting of that weight. If you have a hard time with overhead squat, something else you can do is do this unilaterally. It's definitely easier with one arm up versus two. That being said, I'm going to take it to level 10. I'm going to do 2 kettlebells. You are welcome to do 1 or 2. And remember, if you do 1, do equal on either side. Not 10 and 10, but something like 3 to 5 and 3 to 5. That power range. So, are we ready? This is difficult, so don't worry if you don't get it on the first try. Come back and practice these again. Watch this again. Don't give up. This is the hardest, most elevated form of kind of movement. So don't feel bad if this is your first time. This is difficult. Expect to do a lot of learning on your way to finessing your cleans, and it's a journey that's never over. 10 times. Again, I'm going to start loading as if I'm doing a swing because the first part of the movement is the same. Clean and then finish in my snatch with my weight overhead. 3, 2, and back down. Reload. 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, whatever you can do with max power. Last 2 for me. And 1. So, whoa, right? That's a powerful movement. If you felt that, you're getting it. Last thing we're going to cover today is our thruster. Thruster is an in-between between the clean and the snatch. It's not a press, however. So with my thruster, say I've already cleaned my weight, or I'm just starting here. I want to load my hips like I'm doing a squat jump, right? Remember the stretchy band. Load the hips. When I explode, I stay on the ground instead of jumping. I transfer that power into the kettlebell, so the kettlebell goes up. I should not feel the same as if when I press it with no hips. Pressing it with no hips, harder, more strength, right? This is more a transference of energy from the floor up to the ceiling through my kettlebell. Again, you can do 1, you can do 2, but the kettlebell is going to stay from the shoulders, travel up overhead. When it comes back down, use that kettlebell in the coming back down, just like your squat jump, to reload the next spring. So I'm up here. When it comes down, down, we work together, okay? It's not disjointed like that is a squat and press. Looks the same or similar, not the same, right? Strength versus power, explosivity. I'm going to do my 2 for 10. You're welcome to do 1 for 3 to 5 or 2 for 10 or less. Here we go. The final set. I'm going to go ahead and clean mine up to the shoulders since we just learned how. Beautiful. Now they're going to stay up here. Load the hips. Inhale, exhale. Reload. 2, 3, 4. Power. Really jump. Last 5. Pow. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Oh. Well, I am very warm. So, in conclusion, to day 4 and to wrap this all together, we have a key concept here about power and something really important to know. And the reason we did power last today is that power is a top tier movement. This is kind of the highest level of movement that you can do. It's very difficult. You have to make sure that you train your stability, strength and stability in these kinds of movements before you move to doing plyometrics and power. We don't want to start there. The reason for this is, imagine, if you will, that you are on an icy lake. It's very, very slippery, and you want to take a couple steps, but you might slip and fall. What you should notice is how your body lowers and brings your center of gravity down, and it limits you from taking these big, powerful movements. Can you imagine sprinting on ice? No, right? Because your brain is going, that is a recipe for disaster. I am going to get injured. This is very unstable, okay? And what it does is it powers down, it pulls back power from your muscles so they can't produce maximum force, because doing so on such an unstable surface would be dangerous. So we want to make sure, if you're doing squat jumps, for example, and when you land, you're like this, or you're like this, and we're unstable, you are not going to get the most power. So in the name of, just like how we use less reps, more rest to get max power, we also want to make sure that we've trained stability and we're stable in those moves. A great example is that lunge jump, right? If you're like this, it's not time to do lunge jumps yet. Work on your stability training with your kettlebell, unilaterally loading, rotating with your lunge, just like we covered on strength and stability day. Focus on those stability moves. Once you've noticed progress in that, come back, try those plyos again. But just very important to know that you are going to have more success in your power training when you are stable in the movements that you're attempting to train. The main view I want you to adapt from this series and going forward in your fitness journey is, I'm handing you tools that you can put in your toolbox if they're useful to you. You are one of one. You're an individual inside, in your mind, but also physiologically. We're all unique on the inside. We do not look the same when you cut us open. And we don't even look the same inside, left to right. You don't have the same organs on either side, but just as well, muscles develop differently. There are many things that can be different. So you are one of one, and you are also the scientist and the test subject in this life. You know what you want to get out of it. That's what your mind makes up. You know what you want. So by understanding how to get what you want through these principles with your kettlebell, you can run these experiments with your body, which is the workshops or the workouts that you're doing. Those are the experiments. The exercises and all the variables that go into those experiments will dictate the kinds of responses you get towards your goal, what you really want. Make sure you record data collection. I encourage testing and retesting. Write down your wins and successes. Write down what's challenging to you. You might come back and find that you have conquered that challenge. And by recording this data, taking a serious interest at turning in and seeing what helps your body the most, what does your body respond to the best, you're going to really understand a much better picture of how your body is going to respond to your workouts, how you can get what you want. And I think you'll start to develop this relationship with your body where you can have a more intuitive sense of how to move and what kind of movement your body's craving, what could help it feel better, and understanding the messages that it sends us. So, a little bit deep, but hey, this is Kettlebell Deep Dive. And in conclusion, thank you for joining me for this 4-day series. I personally really enjoyed it. This is the kind of stuff I love to do. And special announcement for next week that we're going to be doing our mobility. Primal mobility is coming back, but with 2 very special classes. We're going to be doing an upregulate session, and upregulation is all about preparing our body, active, tense, excited, preparing our body, upregulating our nervous system for exercise. And the second one is going to be down regulation, bringing it down after a workout, bringing it down after an anxious event, bringing it down before bed, and how to kind of stimulate that parasympathetic nervous system, and likewise for the upregulation, stimulate our sympathetic nervous system. So I can't wait to do that one with you. Another kind of deep dive onto mobility work and breathing and how those things tie together, and how to maximize your time, maximize your pleasure, your peace with your body as you continue on in this journey we call life, because this is your vessel, so take care of it. Enjoy your earth suit. And I will see you next week. Have a great weekend. Thank you for taking Kettlebell Deep Dive, and I'll see you next time.